Hello, this is lesson one of a 4-lesson series. This lesson or unit series is focusing on culture, identity, and belonging, and more specifically within the school community. So I would suggest maybe before you watch this one, I would suggest watching the lesson plan series for the last lesson, as that would have the final project in it. That way you have a little bit of better understanding of why we're doing the order that we're doing. Okay, so to get to the lessons on the agenda today is really just defining key terms like culture and identity, which can be very difficult to do. But so you might need to revise those depending on your students' needs and levels of ability. We're going to be culture and identity mapping, as well as doing some reflections. We're focusing on writing units as well as speaking and listening content standards, writing content standards and speaking and listening content standards. Those are the main focuses throughout the 4 lessons. The student's objective will be able to define culture and identify their multicultural selves, how identity shapes their worldview, and understand why miscommunications occur. And so really what's going to happen is them really just kind of getting to know themselves today and kind of extending that into getting to know other people. This is going to be something that just is kind of a foundation to get them moving. The essential question for this lesson, as well as the rest of the lesson series, is what role does culture play in shaping our school community? These right here are the lessons, the skills that the students are going to be utilizing both for English language arts practices as well as practices that are cross-cutting and transfer into other content areas. And you'll see this on all the lesson series, and they're the same throughout. Okay, so to start, we're going to look at the engage or the do now. I typically start all of my class periods with a quick write, and sometimes I'll finish with them. So that's what I've done here. So students will engage in a quick write. It shouldn't really take them more than 5 or 6 minutes. It's really just a quick write to kind of get some ideas down. Their prompt for this one is, in your own words, what is the definition of culture? Who defines what culture is, and what culture do you identify with and why? And so this is really just to get those ideas generated and get something down before we start sharing. That way every student has the ability to share. After the quick write, students will engage in a quick peer discussion to share ideas, remind them that they can share as much or as little as they want. They don't have to give any personal details, but they can give general statements. After that, you're going to move to a whole class discussion and see kind of the ideas that they're coming up with. And as a class, I would create a definition of culture that will be used to shape the next several lessons. Additionally, what you can do is right at this stage, you've created your definition. And after today and tomorrow's lesson, you could maybe go back and revise that or add to it so students can see how their perceptions of culture and or identity have changed because of what they've learned over the next couple of lessons. Next, you're going to want to get them to explore, and when they're exploring today, they're really just kind of exploring themselves and marginally exploring others. So as a class and individuals, they're going to explore their multicultural selves. So I would model this identity mapping for them using the Think Aloud process. And then after that, students would work independently. So typically what I would do is I would write my name in the center, and then off of my name, I would put all of these stems that with words or word phrases that help me identify who I am. And from there, I would have the students go into an open discussion with each other and find similarities with those. If you want, we're going to be looking at like kind of worldview. You can narrow that worldview down to your city or town or even just the school. I would narrow it down to the school, as this is kind of the focus for the final project. But if students want to expand out, hello, that's okay, right? Let them take the discussion where they need to go. So how does their identity shape their school views and their interactions? So, really like, do they act a certain way because their cultural beliefs at home or the way that they've been brought up? And how does that kind of drive them to be who they are when they're at school or not at school? And what does it mean to be them at this school? So where do they see them fitting in at this school or not fitting in? And with their groups, students can create a list of commonalities and differences, and you can just have them create a T-chart, just something very simple. You could even do it on poster paper. From there, once students have kind of identified or created their own understanding of what culture is and kind of running with that, you can have students, the next step would be to watch a short video on what culture and identity are. I'm really meddling the two together, which may or may not be a good idea, but I feel like they intersect in a way that it's kind of hard to separate them from one another. So the YouTube video that I have linked is actually the digital story that I created for me or by me because I didn't have the ability to teach this lesson series to my classes. So this was the alternative. So what I would do is I would give my students, before watching this video, I would give them a KWL chart. If you're not sure what those are, it's a 3-columned graphic organizer. The K stands for what do you know about the topic, which would be culture and identity. The W stands for what do you want to know about that. And the L is what did you learn about that topic. So prior to watching the YouTube video, you would have them do dot and jot notes for the K and dot and jot notes for the W. These don't need to be very large bodies of writing. They're just to kind of take inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video in full length so that you can see it. And here we go.
Let's talk about culture and identity and the things that make us, us. When we hear the word culture, we often think of our heritage, like I'm Mexican or African American. But culture is so much more. Culture are the customs, practices, traditions, and social norms that make up a social group. And it can be so many different things. That's what we're going to talk about today. While culture is made up of our traditional values and our belief systems, it's also comprised of so much more. Our languages, the sports we watch or play in, the clothes we wear, the TV shows that we watch, and even the music that we listen to all tell us about a culture. And these vary from group to group, city to city, home to home. Even comics are a culture. Marvel or DC, anyone? Have a favorite superhero? You're part of a social group that has a culture. Even sports is a culture all its own. Sports fans have a certain way of acting, ways of doing things, traditions for sports only. So it's not just things like religion and your traditions, it's so much more. And while culture is made up of more than just our religion and our traditions and our beliefs, religion is still a big part of a lot of our cultures, and we can't discount that. Whether you're Catholic or Sikh, you're part of a culture. Culture varies from place to place, whether it's from country to country, state to state, city to city, or neighborhood to neighborhood. Every place is different and has its own culture. For example, if you're in Sanger, it's a different way of life and a different way of living and a different viewpoint than, say, living in New York City. All of these components in regards to culture and so many more that we didn't even talk about are the pieces that help us create our identity. Our identity is how we view ourselves and how we display ourselves to others. It's those little pieces that we put together to make us who we are. Much like we are a part of many cultures, we can also have many identities. Maybe when you're in school, you act a certain way, but when you're at home, you have a different identity and act a different way. Or the perfect example might be language. When you're in school, you typically use a more academic language. But when you're at home, you might use slang. So, what are you made of? What cultures do you belong to? What identities do you have? What makes you, you?
Okay, so now that they've watched that video, you could either have an open discussion or you could have them write down their dot and jot notes for what they've learned and then go to open discussion. But the choice is really up to you. After that, I would have an open discussion about what is culture and continue to define and shape its meaning. Again, this goes back up to the beginning where I was talking about revising the definition that you created. And if it were my class, what I would do is I would keep all of the definitions so that they could watch them evolve over time so that they can see how their understanding has developed. So for closure, I mean, you have all of their discussion and their paperwork, but you could ask them some guiding questions again about like, what is culture? What do you see as culture? What are some non-negotiables for you? And things like that. So exit ticket, what is the culture at our school? So again, narrowing down that world, what is school? If you don't have access to a Google form, you could easily do half sheets of paper or have students write it, on a piece of paper and turn that in. And that would be the completion of lesson 1.